Chapter 5 of the second book is called Men and Masters. So the last chapter was Men and Brothers. This time it's Men and Masters. So this shows Stephen speaking to Bounderby, who has heard that Stephen has been thrown out of the trade union and sees Stephen therefore as an ally against this uprising working class. But Stephen equally says, well, you know, I'm not on your side either, basically, and that these men are quite rightly disenfranchised with the situation because of how bad it is. So with the very similar chapter titles, Dickens is making the point that Stephen is treated equally badly by the Slackbridges and the trade unions as he is by Bounderby. He can't really win. He's a decent man trapped between these two opposing groups, neither of whom are particularly positive. Halfway down page 138, Bounderby addresses Stephen, and Stephen doesn't like it. Okay, and we're told, besides a rough handling of his wounded mind, it seemed to assume that he really was the self-interested deserter he had been called. So Stephen takes issue basically with the fact that Bounderby thinks of him as somebody who'll rat out his friends, basically. And again, it's that idea of naming. You know, Tom's been named a whelp and had that phrase whelp attached to him by Hartos and then the narrator, because there's nothing more to Tom. Stephen here, it's totally different. Stephen sees this as, you know, an affront because there is something internal there. He doesn't fit in with utilitarianism. He's treated badly by the system, but because he's got an individual mind. And interestingly, actually, on only the second line on page 138, the first page, Bounderby refers to people as pests of the earth, and I think that's really, really crucial. We've got a lot of biblical references here, haven't we, with sowing, reaping, garnering. Pests of the earth. Now, in the story of Moses, there's the plague sent to Egypt by God as sort of a punishment for their behaviour. So Bounderby sees these men as pests or a plague or a problem, but actually I think the point is, again, that they're a pest that he's caused, that the upper classes have caused this problem, and therefore it's like this plague that's sort of come back to haunt them. Right at the top of page 139, Bounderby says, because Stephen won't talk, Bounderby says, aha, it shows that he's scared. Stephen says, I said as I had now to say, sir, not as I was fearful of opening my lips. So Stephen, just like Sissy and indeed Hartos, is able to use silence to his own advantage. He's saying, no, I'm not saying anything, but I've got my own reasons for doing that. And we get Dickens' contextual view creeping in a third of the way down, when again he refuses to sort of grass on his fellow men. Stephen says, they take such offers happily, it is not the smallest of their misfortunes when they can get no better. Basically, he sees that Slackbridge is a bad sort of piece of work, but Stephen's point is, well, when the men have got nothing better to look forward to, what else are they going to do? Stephen speaks to Bounderby just before the halfway point on page 140. We're told he spoke with the rugged earnestness of his place and character, deep and perhaps by a proud consciousness that he was faithful to his class under all their mistrust. So Stephen speaks roughly. His language isn't sort of correct, I guess, but Dickens makes the point that it's because his pride is wounded. So again, that inability to speak properly in a way that is recognised actually is a strength. It's a sign of honesty. It's a strength of genuineness, just like with Sleary in his lisp. We're told towards the bottom of page 140, about 3/4 of the way down, Stephen starts speaking. We're told he appeared still to find his natural refuge in Louisa's face. So again, you know, remember, Louisa, very much like Tom, is devoid of personality, but she seems to be sort of drawing in the personality. Sissy's looked at her, and Sissy's, you know, seen that pity. Stephen, again, is addressing her. So Louisa's this void, but actually the good characters are able to sort of fill that in a way that with Tom, that they're not. We're told Stephen basically comes out with his view, and this is Dickens' contextual view, a third of the way down page 42. He says, if you would take 100 Slackbridges, you sink them in the deepest ocean, you'd leave the muddle just where it is. So this is Dickens contextually saying, yes, people like Slackbridge are an issue, but they're not the root of the issue. The problem is the way that, you know, society is so unequal. The Slackbridges of this world, the trade union leaders, the revolutions, are just a byproduct of that. You've got to deal with the problem, not just the people like Slackbridge. Stephen compares it to a clock. He says at the bottom of that paragraph, 2/3 of the way down page 142, put that clock aboard a ship and back it off to Norfolk Island and the time will go on just the same. So it's like getting rid of a clock to stop time. You know, you can't do it. It's pointless. Bearing in mind we've had the deadly statistical clock as Louise is getting married to Bounderby, I think Dickens is using that image again. You know, time going on, people growing up, it's all part of the problem. Louisa as an adult, Tom as an adult are a result of this problem. Right to the bottom of page 142, Stephen says, letting alone will never do it. So again, this is Dickens' attack on laissez-faire. Laissez-faire, remember, meant sort of leave it alone, don't get involved. And Dickens, over the course of this book, changes the meaning of laissez-faire and let it be and leave it alone from something negative where people just don't get involved and don't help to let's leave children to be children. Let's allow Sissy to flourish naturally. And that's what this book basically is tracing the journey of. On page 143, about 2/3 of the way down, Bounderby realises that Stephen's, not sort of singing from the same hymn sheet as him. He says, "You go about sowing it and raising crops. That's the business of your life, my friend." So he's getting angry, and again he compares Stephen to this farmer, sowing and raising crops. Obviously, with the book titles, we're meant to see the irony in that Bounderby's criticising Stephen for sowing and raising discontent as like crops. But really the problem, as Stephen told us, is utilitarianism that sowed the seed that's allowed Tom and Louisa to come out the way that they have. We're told his response. Stephen says, Stephen shook his head, mutely protesting that indeed he had other business to do for his life. So again, lack of words, isn't it? It's silently, but actually showing, that sort of genuine character. And then the next chapter, fading away, so Stephen has been dismissed. Louisa goes to see him and offers him some money to help him out. She's starting to change. She's starting to see that there's sort of some humanity, there. We're told on page 146, about 5 lines down, Louisa is described as having fine, dark, thinking eyes and a still way. Remember that chapter, the father and daughter chapter, where there's no verbs, everything's still. Louisa here is still. It's that idea of no movement for Louisa. And then at the top of page 147, second line, Rachel answers Stephen with her comforting smile. So again, it's that silence, using it to sort of for an advantage. We're told that Stephen's wife hasn't come back. She came back. She troubles him basically. This alcoholic, this wife that he can't get rid of. We're told just over the halfway point on page 147, the only evidence of a last return with the scanty immovables in his room and the greyer hairs upon his head. So Stephen's wife is definitely allied with him losing his youth. She's this sign of him, becoming an older man, basically, the lost youth that he's got. We're told on about 7 or 8 lines from the bottom of page 147, Stephen, he too, with the world of wide heath before him. That's reference to Paradise Lost. At the end of Paradise Lost, Adam and Eve are sent out of heaven, and they're told that the world is all before them. So Stephen is compared to Adam and Eve in the same way. So again, it's another religious reference used by Dickens to ally Stephen with religion, basically, and with goodness. On page 149, about 5 lines down, Louisa visits Stephen, and we're told for the first time in her life, Louisa had come into one of the dwellings of the Coat Town Hands. For the first time in her life, she was face to face with anything like individuality in connection with them. She knew their existence by hundreds and by thousands. She knew what results in work a given number of them would produce in a given space of time. So again, Dickens is focused on the problems with utilitarianism, the fact that it might allow you to assess the situation from a macro point of view, seeing the hundreds and thousands, but actually it doesn't allow you this sort of connection with them, this individuality. And then we're told, oh yes, that's it, about 10 lines from the bottom, Louisa reddens at a mistake, so she asks whether Rachel's his wife and then realises. So she's reddening, so again it's showing that emotion growing. Remember, her red cheeks initially came when Bounderby kissed her, and she rubbed her cheeks sort of red raw because she didn't want the kiss, and here she's reddening because of the mistake. We're seeing this emotion sort of slowly, bit by bit, breaking out of her. We've got Louisa on page 150, very, very top. She instinctively addressed herself to Rachel. So again, Rachel, one of these silent women just like Sissy, but who uses that more positively than somebody like Mrs. Gregor, who just fades into the distance. And about 10 lines down, Louisa asks, look, can you get employment again? We're told the chances are very small, young lady, next to nothing for a man who gets a bad name among them. So again, naming is really, really crucial. The narrator has named Tom as a whelp, but here's the idea that the names that are given to people are particularly significant here. And then we're told on page 151, just before the halfway point, Louisa stretched out her hand as if she would have touched him, then checked herself and remained still. So again, that word still again. That idea, she's desperate for this human contact. She is changing, but the stillness kicks in. The father and daughter chapter with no verbs, that stillness, that growing up, that upbringing is still sort of showing itself in her. Then Tom comes in and speaks to Stephen and basically frames Stephen, makes him wait outside the bank so that Tom can rob it and frame him. We're told about 4 lines down, his breath fell like a flame of fire on Stephen's ear, it was so hot. So again, we've got this devilish imagery linked with Tom, this sort of evil imagery, but also the fire as well has been linked to Louisa. It's that sense of fire breaks out, that because of their upbringing, for both of them, this fire is breaking out. It's doing it in different ways, but it's a result of their childhood. We're told about 2/3 down the page he had wormed a finger in the darkness through a buttonhole of Stephen's coat and was screwing the corner of the garment tight up around and round in an extraordinary manner. So again, entrapping him, he's pulling him, he's linked to this kind of entrapping imagery on Stephen. And then at the bottom of page 153, we're told Stephen says to Rachel, "You make me see it with a better eye." So again, there's this idea of these silent women, but Bounderby and Gradgrind can't see it. Gradgrind speaks to his daughter, and Louisa tells him basically how she feels, but he can't see it. Here we've got Stephen who's much more discerning, just like Sissy's eyes, who sees the truth, who pities Louisa for what's going on. Dickens becomes a bit more didactic at the bottom of page 153. He gives us his view a bit more clearly when Stephen and Rachel part. We're told it was but a hurried parting in the common street, yet it was a sacred remembrance to these two common people. Utilitarian economists, skeletons of schoolmasters, commissioners of facts. And he continues basically, you'll never understand this. There's more to life than these utilitarianists see. So it's Dickens using these imperatives to get this message off a lot more clearly. And then right at the end of the chapter, we're told, about 5 lines from the bottom, Stephen is beginning like a boy this summer morning. So there's this sense of innocence, almost like Bryony, she has that journey and rewrites atonement and comes up with a new identity. Stephen is leaving, and there is that sense of innocence. He has been turned out, but actually he's still innocent. And with his death that comes later on, he is allowed to remain in that state of innocence. He isn't really corrupted, in the same way that Bryony, through a story in atonement, can allow people to keep that innocence and to allow Cecilia and Robbie to be together.